So if you're spending all this time on Twitter or you're Facebooking and you're LinkedIn and you're YouTubing and doing all this other stuff and you want to know, is it really paying off? Well, all you've got to do is take a look at your traffic source report, because you can tell how much traffic is coming from Google. And of that traffic, how much of it's organic versus how much of it's pay-per-click. You can keep track of how much stuff is coming in from Facebook or Twitter or LinkedIn, things like that. What's really cool is not only is it about the traffic sources, but you can find out what search words they used to find you. So, when you start talking about doing your keyword research and you start talking about optimizing for certain keywords, the best information that you can have is what your customers are actually typing in. So that's huge. That's worth its weight in gold right there. The other thing that you can talk about in your traffic sources is you can keep track of your pay-per-click stuff, your AdWords, because every time you create an AdWords campaign, you're going to have campaign names, you're going to have keywords that you're targeting and stuff like that. So, in the traffic sources areas where you're going to find out reports on all that information. And then the last area of the reports, this is the one that probably most people are more comfortable with, more familiar with, and this is content, right? This is the pages on your site. How many times was this page loaded? How many times was that page loaded? Analytics does some really cool things with things like site speed. You can also keep track of your site search. So for example, if you have a blog or something like that, or some sort of a search running on your site, not only can you keep track of the keywords of the search engine keywords of how people found you from the search engines, but once they found you, then you can also keep track of the keywords that they typed into your search box to find what they're looking for. So not only how are they getting to you, but once they find you, what is it that your users are looking for? And the really cool part, one of the really nice things of the newer version of Google Analytics is that there's custom event tracking. Now before, when somebody wanted to download a link, or somebody wanted to submit some sort of a form with an AJAX kind of a form submission, we couldn't keep track of that because another page wasn't loaded. Analytics works based on the fact that you've got some code on this page and some code on this page. So when you make that jump, it goes, okay, they went from here over to here. But if you stay on the same page and you perform a transition or some sort of a transaction, Google Analytics couldn't keep track of that. With event tracking now we can. So if you've got a video on your page, we could tell how many times that page was loaded, but you had no idea how many times that video was watched. Now we can keep track of that. Not only can we keep track of it, we can also keep track of who stopped it in the middle. We can keep track of how many people watched it all the way through to the end. And then if you have some sort of a call to action, we can keep track of that too. Right? If you have some sort of a document download, like if you want people to download some sort of form off of your website, we can totally keep track of that with event tracking. So with those three types of reports, and again, we're talking phase one, basic usage, visitor reports, traffic sources, and content reports. What those three reports are going to do is those are going to give you a really good, kind of like a 10,000 foot view of your website, right? It's kind of like going to the doctor for a checkup. They're going to give you really good information, and it's awesome for pinpointing any potential problems that are going on with your site. If you've got pages that aren't loading, you're going to see high bounce rates and stuff like that. What's next is going to be what we call phase two, and those are goals. Everything that we talked about in phase one has been general data, right? I mean, this has been all of the default stuff that Google Analytics has decided to give us, and we're happy to take it, okay? The first step in customization, though, for your business is being able to set up goals. And the reason why we like those is because those are things that we actually set up, right? In order to be able to set up a goal, it's actually a really simple process. You really only need two pieces of information. A third one is optional. The first thing is a name, right? Because these goals are going to have reports associated with them, you want to give them unique and meaningful names. So, when you're looking at the report, you want to go, oh yeah, that's what the goal was, or that's what the goal is. You want to be able to give them a type. There's going to be 3 different types of goals, and we'll talk about that in a couple of minutes. And then you also, one of the optional values that you can do is you can be able to give it your goal of value. So for example, if you were keeping track of some sort of e-commerce transactions and that was part of your goal, you could say, oh, well, my average, you could say my average sale is $74, put that in the value field, and then what will happen is you can start to use that in terms of forecasting potential sales. So it's pretty cool to be able to do that. Now the thing to keep in mind with goals is every profile has a maximum of 20 goals. They break them up into chunks of, think it's chunks of 5, and you can have four groups of 5 goals. I don't know why they do that, but that's just the way that they are. But I mean, in my experience, most businesses aren't going to use a full 20 goals, okay? So again, goals can be one of 3 different types. The first type is a URL goal, and they've been around for as long as Google Analytics has been tracking these things. And a URL goal is basically just that. It's one that's based on a specific URL or a page. So where you might see one of these is if you were tracking something like, I don't know, a newsletter sign up, or maybe somebody filling out a contact form where you could send them over to a specific thank you page. This would be, as soon as they land on that thank you page, if that was your goal URL, that would register that one goal. And then, you want it to be a page that, there's only one way to get there, but, you get the idea. The second type of goal, Google actually added back in like 2009, sometime around there, and these are called engagement goals. Now, again, we're taking it a little bit further, right? So now with our engagement goals, not only can we say, well, when people land on a specific page, but now we can keep track of a couple of additional pieces of information. One of them is time on site. So if the idea is that you want to be able to keep people on your site for a specific period of time, maybe 5 minutes or 7 minutes if you're having some sort of a content-rich site, or you're selling ads or something like that. This is a way that you can be able to do that. So you can say, okay, as soon as somebody stays on my site for 7 minutes, that goal gets triggered. The other thing is that you can keep track of pages per visit. So if your goal is that you want to be able to trigger, I don't know, maybe 5 pages per visit, or you want 10 pages per visit, that's a pretty good indicator of engagement, how many times people are bouncing around and kind of playing with your website. You can absolutely trigger a goal based on that. And then the third type of goal that we're going to talk about, these are relatively new. These actually just came out in April of this year, and these are called event goals. And events we kind of talked about a little bit earlier. The types of things that we couldn't previously track. Things like document downloads, video playing, stuff like that. So now what we can do is we can set up goals based on those events, and then run reports to see, okay, not only how many people landed on my page, but actually how many people downloaded my form. Okay, so here, let's go through a couple of examples. I think that may help. So let's assume that one of the goals that I had for my business was to increase my newsletter signups. Okay, so being a good corporate citizen, I'm using something like an Aweber, where you're going to have this double opt-in, whatever. So somebody comes by the website, they sign up, they get an email. Once they click on the link that's inside of that email, that's going to be their opt-in, or their double opt-in. What'll happen is we can tell Aweber to redirect them to a special page. Now, on that special page, we'll probably give them some more value. Hey, this is great. Think you might like this kind of an article or something. But once they land on that secondary page, that one URL that's specific to that process, I know that just triggered it. So now I can keep track of that, not only with the newsletter signups, but also with my reporting, right? So I don't have to kind of bounce back and forth between a bunch of different tools and stuff like that to keep track of it. A second example, this is maybe a little more complicated or a little more realistic now, with video being more and more. Let's say, for example, you have a landscaping company, and you have a series of how-to videos, but one of the videos or one of the pages that seems to get a whole lot of traffic is how to trim rose bushes. I've had rose bushes before, and I don't know, I kill them all the time. I trim them back way too much, or I don't trim back enough. It's a huge pain. Anyway, you want to understand a little bit more about how people are looking at that. So what we do is we would create events for that, and maybe some of the events would be keep track of how many times the page was loaded. We can keep track of how many times the video player was fully loaded or not. And then what we can say is we can keep track of when it was played, how many people clicked play. We can keep track of how many people stopped, or we can keep track of how many people watched it all the way to the end. So if you wanted to do something like talk about, I don't know, maybe one of your services, maybe you've got a rose trimming service, but you talk about it at the very end of the video, that's going to be really useful information to know if only 8% of your people are getting to the end of the video. You know what I mean? If nobody's watching that, you got to figure out, first of all, why are they not watching it? Or, put the pitch of your service at the very beginning. Do whatever you got to do to get them to get that. So, that's another example that's probably a little more, it's going to be a little more meaningful, especially if you're using a lot of video, which a lot of people are using now. So, now we're starting to get better, right? We can start to create our own goals. We can start to interact with, we can use analytics to actually kind of work with our site. Now it's starting to become like a little dance, right? I mean, we can figure out what we want to know, and then we can go out there and get those goals. Now let's do another example. Let's say, for example, I'm an automotive store, right? I'm selling carburetors and disc brakes and all kinds of craziness. But, auto stores, we know they do a lot of pay-per-click, right? Because people are searching online for part numbers and they're doing all this kind of stuff. So let's say, for example, in my instance, I'm buying 1,000 clicks a month. But I'm noticing that out of those 1,000 clicks a month, I'm only getting 100 sales that are coming through. So I'm losing 900 clicks. I'm paying for them, but I'm losing them. Where am I losing those? Where do we find out where those went? Well, a sales process isn't just a one-page thing. It's not just a newsletter sign up, or it's not just a video download, right? It could be that you get somebody over to a landing page and then they go to a product-specific page. And then even when they add something to the cart, you have your cart, and then there's probably a couple of checkout pages where you put in your billing information, and then you put in your shipping information and your credit card stuff, and then there's going to be a thank you. So an e-commerce, there could be 4, 5, 6 pages in there, and they could be bouncing off it any other way. So if you want to know where are those other 900 people going, a specific goal isn't going to tell you that. The goal is going to tell you, I made 100 sales and that's it. So what we're going to do is we're going to branch out into phase number 3, and this is where it gets really exciting, and you can really glean a lot of information about how users are on your site and they're using your site, and it's what's called goal funnels or sales funnels.